I mean, we can always edit this, right?
Absolutely. As much as I love editing. All right, so welcome everyone. I am Kevin Walker, and my associate is
Chris Accardo.
And we are the Super Dharma
Bros.
Yes.
Air horn noise.
Now, what I suggest you do is this.
Welcome, everyone. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're awesome. If you're listening to our podcast, you are equally awesome because we do not discriminate. All right, so the topic today is faith in Buddhism. So let that sink in for a second while you listen to our tune, and we will get the discussion started.
But if you can't help words running in your head, don't interfere with them.
Okay. I just want to say, I like how our backgrounds look like metaphors for our different denominations. Like yours is like clean and white and just like empty and totally focused, and mine's like religious jazz hands.
Well, we sort of have a different viewpoint on iconography.
Yeah. I just thought that was funny. I was like, it's like a metaphor. Anyway.
All right, so our topic this week is faith in Buddhism. And so here's the general format we're going to go through. Our discussion is going to go through why is there a misunderstanding of why faith in Buddhism sort of are, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe Chris would be able to describe that better.
I would say that in the West, they are almost kind of at odds with each other sometimes. Or there's a love-hate relationship there between faith and Buddhism.
Right. Also, we're going to go through, well, what if we do have faith, or what if we have a lack of faith? And then we'll have some closing thoughts at the end. So, Chris, you said sometimes, faith in Buddhism, especially from a Western standpoint, is sort of at odds with each other. Would you like to sort of get the discussion started? And, why do you think that is?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of that in America and in Western Buddhism is kind of a cultural thing. I think Buddhism kind of has come up in like academic roots here. And it has often been almost quasi-anti-religious. So because of that faith word, which is such a hinging point for other religions, that's the core of their whole thing, the faith thing. I think when Buddhists or when Western Buddhists hear that, they get a little dodgy. Like they don't like hearing that. They don't like kind of that association with it. So I think more so, it's just a bad association we have with it in a way. And I think we're about to unpack this, but I think faith is there. It's just that they mistake what the faith is and what's it,
Well, and I think, when a lot of people in the West think about Buddhism, they think about, Buddhism doesn't have like a God entity that we pray to for salvation or guidance or what have you. And so they think that, faith isn't really a word that can be applied to Buddhism. And we're like you said, we're going to unpack this, but the definition of faith from a Buddhist context is different than what we might think about here in the United States, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So, for us, the faith, and you're probably about to say this, but for us, the faith is in enlightenment. It's not in a God entity. It's not in this thing that's out there. It's in a concept that we are being asked to kind of wrangle with and to ultimately find ourselves. But I think what people often mistake is that we don't, in the beginning stages of practice, we don't know that thing's there. We haven't experienced it. And so I think the whole concept of enlightenment itself, which is like what this entire podcast video series thing we're going to do, is the exploration of that concept, because that's what Buddhism is, the exploration of this concept. I think people take that for an assumption. So even when I hear, Western Buddhists who are devoutly non-religious and who say it has no religious ties, there's nothing that looks like a religion, in the same breath, they'll then say, and this is how you achieve enlightenment. as if this enlightenment thing itself is just this assumption. Like, of course you can. And I don't think that's the case. I think that requires a small leap of faith, or a huge one.
I would argue it takes a huge leap of faith because, like you said, we can sort of get glimpses of it in our practice, but we still have to have faith that it is there for us if we follow the path. And so for like someone who starts at the beginning, that might be a huge leap for them. And so in Theravada, there's a lot of talk about having faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Dharma, if you want to use the Sanskrit, and the Sangha, because those things are they're more verifiable compared to enlightenment, awakening, because you can explore the teachings of the Buddha, which is the Dhamma, and Dhamma is also sort of like our version of truth, and the Sangha, those that are practicing, we can verify that more than we can, Nirvana is a thing, and it's totally there, so those are more, you can confirm those a lot better than, this thing that I've gotten glimpses of.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that in our culture, the concept of, even if we get rid of the big enlightenment, the big enlightenment with a big E, and it's this like whole huge like rainbows and unicorns thing, even if you get rid of that, Buddhism, the entire core of Buddhism hinges on that you can improve, you can change, you can take actionable steps towards problems, towards human suffering. And I think that alone is actually kind of just a transgressive, almost faith-based concept here in the West. I think we have internalized the concept that we're kind of wicked, regardless of whether we're secular or Christian or Jewish. I think that kind of we're dirty and flawed and inherently selfish is just the thing we have here. There's a musician who I like, Mia Follick, who I totally recommend you check out. She was raised as a Zen Buddhist, and she's no longer practicing, but I'll take what I can get. There's not a lot of Buddhist musicians out there, publicly. And she has this story about how when she went to college, and she took like a philosophy class, and she sat down, and the professor opened with the question of, can people become good? And only 2 people raised their hands, and she was one of them. And not the question, are people good? Or, what's the nature of humans? It was, could you even do it? And most people just thought no. And I think we've internalized that concept. And Buddhism is saying, no, you can be better. What that looks like, that's the thing we're all debating about as Buddhists, but we can be. And I think that alone is a leap of faith in a way.
Right, and that really points to like having faith in the Buddha. He was the perfected one, basically. He started out with defilements and then was able to find a path where those defilements sort of fell away. And this is probably more like in a different discussion, but the whole term perfected has a different meaning, from like a Buddhist concept than to like, you become perfect. That's not necessarily what that means in that context, but more to the point of faith. Sada is the Pali word for it, and it shows up in various places, different contexts. So I think we need to take that under consideration when we talk about it too, because it can also mean trust or confidence. And there was a talk that I was listening to, by a Kate Munding. She was talking about faith in a talk, and she said it can also mean literally to place the heart upon. And so it's not necessarily all logic based. It's also something that we have to invest our hearts into as well. And so I think we need to take a look at that when we look at context of where these words are showing up.
Yeah, I guess I would add, and so we talked about this when we were planning for this podcast. In a way, I've also been looking up what other Buddhists believe. And I think So the most interesting form of Buddhism that's been coming up in the West has been this, non-faith, non-religious Buddhism. And so I kind of listen to a lot of works by folks in those fields to try and see what they kind of think. Because I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, so I definitely have more of the woo-woo religious faith end of it. And a lot of the folks I listened to discussed how that the faith is still important, even if they're getting rid of the big E capital faith, and that faith becomes entrusting our own experience and entrusting that we can work through it and entrusting that we can take those steps to eventually realize something. So even if we don't have the big E capital experience, the trust that we can move onward, that's the big thing. I think all Buddhists share that. That's kind of like lately I've been moving from the idea that maybe our faith is in the big E capital enlightenment. And I don't know if that's true, but we do believe in the steps towards the big E capital enlightenment. Like, we're all doing that no matter what we're practicing.
Right. All right. So I think this is a good time to move into, okay, so faith obviously is really important, even though the definition is a little bit different. But what about, if there's let's start with the bad news first. I'm that type of a person where it's like, okay, we have good news and we have bad news. Which do you want to hear first? I want to hear the bad news first, get that out of the way. So a lack of faith, how does that affect a practice? And so in the Pali Canon, a lack of faith is called doubt. And it's sort of described as, a fog or muddied water because it obscures our view of, how things really are, right view, if you want to put that term out there. And, I would even say from personal experience, having a lack of faith, not only does doubt give you sort of that feeling of like a fog or muddied water, but also sort of, it makes me feel like I'm wandering without any direction.
I think the other thing too, and I'm completely mixing metaphors here. You're talking about the wandering, the directionlessness. It also feels like being stuck, even in my own life when my faith kind of, I don't want to say fell apart. I always had the faith thing in Buddhism, but this thing happens sometimes where life changes, things change, your experience and your relationship with Buddhism or your faith changes. And it just becomes so much bigger and more complicated. And then you're sitting there and you're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do next, and you still have faith. You still think the thing's out there. You're asking, well, what do I do now? And so I think, and this is kind of like my only real thought on this, I guess. A teacher, I think, beautifully explained it. Sharon Salzberg explained it, that she was talking about meditation, but she is a Buddhist, and so by extension Buddhism. She talks about how meditation in Buddhism is about the practice of returning. So this idea that, like, when we sit and do breathing meditation, it's the perfect metaphor for the whole practice. You sit, follow the in-breath, follow the out-breath, follow the in-breath, get distracted, return back, follow the in-breath, follow the out-breath. We do this with everything. It's doing the thing, going off the rails, coming back and returning to it. And that is the faith. The faith is the thing that brings you, that when it fails, because it will, you then go, okay, I at least want to get back there. And the faith it's not like this like brilliant guiding light that's like, the way is clear and paved. But it's being lost and going, I'm lost, and recognizing that and saying, what do I do? It's being stuck and saying, I'm stuck, and recognizing that and going, what do I do? And for me, that's what the faith is. And that's when we don't have it, we just get stuck. We just stay lost.
Right. And I found a sutta that basically, if I were to do the summary point of it, is that awakening, which is the same thing as enlightenment, just, different terminology. Awakening without faith is borderline impossible because it's a prerequisite to get there. You got, like you said, we have faith in the steps to get us there. If there's no faith in those steps, you're basically stuck, like you were explaining. So a lack of faith is, it's not an experience necessarily you should be like, yeah, sign me up for that. Because, unless you torturing your spirit or whatever. But that's not something that I would necessarily be like, yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah, yeah. And so we have in Tibetan Buddhism, we kind of have a similar concept that faith, like you just said, faith is the prerequisite for the next thing that you do after that, for the pursuit of enlightenment. For us, faith inspires the practice. Faith is that thing when we're sitting there stuck going, I don't know what to do. It's that little voice that says, no, take the next step, figure something out. And then when we take that next step, that thing we're stepping towards is logic and reason for Tibetan Buddhists. So we sit, we work with our feelings, we recognize what's happening, and then we use all these excellent teaching systems and logic and reason to figure out, well, what do I do next? And I think that is the unique thing to Buddhism, is that it says you need this faith to practice. But what is the practice? It is the practice of logic and reason. It's an applied science of mind, if you will, which I have problems with that term a little bit, but that's what it is. And so for us, that's the thing. You have faith, but faith leads to the pursuit of logic and reason.
And this is a good lead-in, actually, to, you have faith. What are the benefits of that? Where can you go from there? So in the Samyutta Nikaya in 25.3, I'll be doing this a lot, people, so get used to it. Conviction and belief makes you a faith follower, which is basically on the way to the first step of awakening, which is stream entry. Very complicated sort of like thought there. But if you don't have that, that doesn't get you to that next step like we were talking about. And then in the Anguttara Nikaya, which is a collection of shorter discourses, there's this general. He's just like, yeah, I'm freely generous and all this jazz. And the Buddha's like, oh, did you know there are 4 benefits? There are 5 benefits to that. And he's like, yeah, I know the first 4, but the last one I'm not so sure about, which was taking rebirth in a heavenly world. That's something that the general took on faith. He's like, I don't know that directly, but you're the awakened one. I'm going to take that on faith. And the Blessed One also said that the best wealth is faith. When asked that dreaded question by the many various demons that seem to show up. And faith in a triple gem is also a prerequisite for that first sort of stage. And that's seen in the Anguttara Nikaya as well, 1092. So without having that sort of faith, the next step up, you go from like a faith follower. There's also something called a Dhamma follower that, examines the teachings and continues their practice based on that. But at the same time, we're talking about faith here. So faith is sort of that prerequisite to get into stream entry, the first sort of stage of awakening.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think for us, faith is not the complete absence of doubt. It is what we do with that doubt. You know what I mean? So we have that doubt. And then like you said, we then are looking to the Dharma, the text. We're looking to the Buddha as a voice of guidance. And none of those things are saying don't doubt. They're saying, look at what your doubt is pointing to. For us, doubt, suffering, all these things are fantastic in a way because they're the thing that make us think.
Right. So
we shouldn't just be blindly faithful, but we should doubt deeply. And then with that doubt, we go, well, what do I do? And that's the faith for me.
Right. And this is sort of something that we've touched on quite a bit already is, and you speak about it when it comes to logic and reasoning in your practice. This is all verifiable. The teachings, as written in the Pali Canon, for the most part, you can verify based on experience.
Yeah.
And so it's not like, don't take my word for it. Go out and test it and see if that comes out true. And if it doesn't, well, then you don't have to follow that way. If you're truly convinced that that way is not it. However, if we don't test it and we just take it, blindly, it's like, pardon me, it's sort of, I don't know, it takes sort of something out of the experience.
Well, there is nothing in Buddhism, I would argue, and from from experimenting with now like 3 different schools of Buddhism, I haven't found a single moment where they ever go, take this blindly. They encourage you to do the opposite. You know, the Buddha's last words are, everything's impermanent, be a light unto yourself. He basically says, figure it out. You know, that's the last thing the dude says on earth is, figure it out. I'm going to give you some baselines, you go from there. And so, yeah, I think that's what we do with it. Like, it is like, that is the thing it's asking us to do, is to question. That's the big thing it's telling us, is keep questioning. Everything the Buddha says is question, 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 you know? And in my own tradition, this is often funny. Like, we have, you know, we put heavy emphasis on teachers. And people will often kind of get like weird about questioning something the teacher said. But in my experience with my own teachers, when you question them, the smile on their face, they're like, yeah, good. Let's argue. And to be clear, they school me every time. Like, I get my ass kicked every time. But it's, you know, that's what they actually want. And I think that's what the Buddha wants. I think that's what the Dharma wants. It wants us to question, you know? But, and I'm kind of segueing almost maybe into my closing thoughts here, and let me know if I'm doing this too early. But you nailed it before, that this is incrementally realized. And I think that is, for us, the big difference in our faith compared to other religious faiths. So, you know, if you are, there's nuance to all of this, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, everyone has different perspectives on this, so this isn't monolithic. But for the most part, you know, as a Christian, in a way, you don't get to realize or ever learn if the thing you have faith in is real. Like, you are never going to get the answer in this life. Like, God doesn't come, you don't get an email one morning that says, from God, I am real, ... You know, heaven, all these concepts, you don't get to know in this life. Buddhism says, no, you're going to figure out in this life. And you can figure it out incrementally. And that's the other thing that we have that maybe other faiths don't. So the beautiful analogy I've often heard is that as Buddhists, we are looking for kind of this vein of gold hidden somewhere in the ground, this deep pocket of gold. And we excavate, and we're digging, and we're digging, and we're digging, and you find a fleck of gold. And you go, okay, I haven't found the big thing, but I found this little piece. And you dig, and you find a bigger piece. And honestly, maybe you never find the whole big thing. Maybe you collect enough gold just in the digging. Maybe you found all the treasure that way. I don't know. But that's unique to us. We can find these little itty bitty pieces in our practice as we're going. And I don't think most faiths get that breadcrumb trail.
Right. Can I turn those gold flecks into cash?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what the Buddha wants.
My financial problems are all taken care of then.
The Buddha was okay with people making money. We're going to talk about that one later.
Yes. So, no, actually, I think this is perfect to go into our closing thoughts here. So, why don't you take away your closing thoughts? I've done an awful lot of talking.
Well, so that was my big one, was that, you know, for us, faith is incremental. I think the other one, though, is that you nailed it with the confidence thing. For us, Buddhist faith is confidence. And that's how it's translated in Tibetan too, probably because it's translated from the same word that you came from. I often notice that when we're talking, you'll say like, oh, this is that word. And I'll go like, that's crazy. That's our word. And then I forget my word is a translation, like 5 filters of translation to your word. But confidence. So I'm a rock climber for fun. This is this metaphor came to my mind when I think about this for Buddhism too. The first time, like, you're rock climbing and you're tying the equipment to yourself and you're tying yourself to the rope, you don't know if that rope's going to really work. It's a thin rope. It's terrifying. You look down, it's a 400-foot drop, and you go, I'm going to tie myself with a knot I've never tied to this thing. And I'm going to trust that it will hold me the entire way down. That is faith. Once you reach the bottom and everything held up, that is now confidence. And that is for us how it works. We don't know the thing's going to work necessarily, but when we start working with the thing and it works, we go, okay, I'm now confident in it. It's no longer just blind faith. And that's how I feel that all Buddhist practice operates.
Yeah, and also, when it happens over and over again, it keeps working over and over again. That's like the definition of confidence. You're able to do something over and over again without, any big pitfalls. And so I think that's a really good simile. Maybe I'll steal that for one of my Sutta episodes on my YouTube channel.
you gotta start rock climbing though. That's the thing. That's what makes it real. You gotta have the experience behind your voice.
Well, can't say I have a lot of confidence in that particular practice with me. So sort of like my closing thoughts are just a summary of everything that we've talked about. Faith is paramount to Buddhist practice, even though the definition is slightly different and the experience is slightly different, because it's more of like a conviction, a trust sort of thing. And we're told to sort of test the teachings out. And that doesn't say that we lack faith in the teachings. It's basically we're following directions when we do that. Something I wish, some of the kindergartners I worked with this year would have done a little bit better. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Faith is one of those things, sometimes real life will hit you really hard and your faith will waver, but it's a matter of returning to it. And so I'll just say, if your faith right now is wavering, sort of try to gently get yourself back to where you were. Don't try to get right back to it, because that's like taking, that's like trying to take 3 steps up, the stairwell when your legs aren't that long.
Right.
Just take the steps that you can, and then, see where that takes you. And hopefully you can get back to a better place where you once were.
Yeah. And I think we're all in this right now. We're all in this boat with COVID, with everything right now. Everything's uncertain. Like every commercial now starts with, in these uncertain times, I think when we can't have confidence, then faith becomes persistence. Maybe you can't feel it right now. Maybe practice isn't working the way you wanted it to right now. Maybe nothing's working the way you wanted it to right now. But yeah, returning, saying, I'm going to go back, I'm going to try again, And you're going to have, your mileage will vary with that. Maybe I don't know what happens with you after that, but you need to ask that question and you need to say, I will persist in moving forward towards something. I don't know what that is, but you'd move forward.
All right, so that is faith in Buddhism. Basically, in a nutshell, we could have talked for days about this. All right, so we are going to be trying to do an episode every couple of weeks. So I hope that you enjoyed this particular episode, found it sort of insightful, and you're able to apply it to whatever faith you may follow. So this is Kevin Walker checking out.
Yeah. Chris Accardo saying thank you for joining us.
All right, everyone, take care of yourselves, and we'll chat with you next time.
Just feel. But if you can't help words running in your head, don't interfere with them.